I take us live. Hopefully that didn't all come through. I don't think it did. Nah. Hi everyone.
How are you?
Good. We were just talking about after a year of flailing around, we're still struggling to get up and running with streams. But Dave, I'm great. How are you?
Yeah, no complaints at all. Happy birthday.
Thank you. Thank you. It's I feel like lately I've been enjoying my birthdays a lot more.
Oh yeah?
Really just
More than what? Obviously in the past, but what have you been doing differently?
just really embracing it, taking a day off. Just really like I think really nailing what exactly you want to do is challenging for me. Okay, I really just want to go to this one place and eat this one thing. So let's just
Yeah.
do that.
Do
Um,
you struggle like conceptualizing what it is you want to do, or being selfish
yeah,
enough to just do that and not worry about anyone else?
a bit of both.
Yeah.
And like agony, I'm not good at decision making. The agony of choice. You
Yeah,
know,
fair
there's
enough.
so many restaurants and so many bars that I would love to go to or would love to revisit. From any price point in Melbourne, there's probably a dozen places I'd like to visit. So finding that one is so challenging when it comes to it.
Definitely.
The fact that it's narrowed down to bars and restaurants, though, is already like a small siphoning of the vast majority of things that you could do
Yeah,
on your birthday. Like at least there's a small understanding of what it is.
yeah. Generally, it's art gallery or
Right.
some sort of exhibition, and then
Yeah.
food and wine, or food and beer,
Yeah.
or food and cocktails. So, I guess for purposes of illustrating, my decisions were Superling, which is the restaurant attached to the Lincoln Hotel,
Oh
which is
yeah.
closing down this weekend.
All right.
So that was kind of a decision made for me of going, I really want to try that place.
Sure.
Let's do it. And that was, I'm really disappointed I only tried it now.
What did you have?
Mm.
We had, so it's kind of Chinese inspired fusion stuff. So we had wonton skin nachos that had like mapo tofu as the meat, crispy wonton skins, and like broccoli as a guacamole. It was
Mm.
really good. Uh, some
Doesn't make any sense how I'm putting it together in my mind, but it sounds delicious though.
we saw it land on the table next to us, and we are like, well, that's what we're
Gotta
getting
have
that.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
They do a mapo tofu jaffle. They do
Mm.
fresh handmade noodles just with some. We did pepper chicken, so just nice and peppery chicken, just gorgeous noodles, and just some fresh broccoli, like some steamed broccoli with a really nice sauce. Really fun. Anyway,
Very
no one
cool.
can eat there unless you've got a booking between now and next week. And also we did birdie for cocktails, birdie
Mm.
BYRDI, and that I've been there once before, and going back reaffirmed that I want to go back numerous times. It's so
Mm.
good. Uh,
I've never been. I've really wanted to go.
there's never been a place. There's no places that I've ever go to and go. I don't know what I'm drinking.
Mm.
Normally, I know enough to construct. Okay, this drink is made from these ingredients. I couldn't tell you what was in what I drank. One of them had sake lees in it.
Yeah.
Maybe there was sake involved. Maybe they use that for. I don't know. Uh,
Sake leaves have a huge secondary use in Jap. Oh, you probably know, but in Japanese cuisines, like, but they don't necessarily need to have any sake in it. But like, their flavor is amazing.
yeah. So I don't know if they use. I mean, I can't imagine they use that for
That sake,
fermentation.
yeah.
But whatever one of them had mango and citric lactic acid, so sour and
Mm.
but there was a mango ferment with added sourness, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. If you ever really want a really good cocktail, and they're not like they're expensive, but comparative to most cocktail places in the city, it's I think $26 for the six sort of top end ones. And for what you're getting so much work. You're getting kind of months or a year worth of work in
Mm.
your drink, and then kind of assembled in front of you. Yeah, it's a real
I think
experience.
also like if you're planning a couple of cocktails or a night of cocktails, then you I mean it's going to be expensive. That's the nature of the beast, isn't it?
I just love that concept that they have there, and like, I mean, Luke, particularly when he told me about it, like just about, I think that's the point, Luke, is that they don't want you to know. it's so many people order cocktails based on the spirits that are in them rather than the flavors in the drink,
Hmm.
and they kind of wanted to just turn that on its head in terms of like no, like in terms of how they name them and how they even talk about them. It's not meant to be a secret as such, but it's not meant to drive the decision. So that you're first as a customer to think about the flavors that you want rather than
And it
pandering to your experience in the past, as it were.
and it does drive people to be curious about it.
Mm,
The team there are so skilled and so knowledgeable that if you have any questions, they're right there for you, and they can probably tell
cool.
you, the temperature it was fermented at, and where the honey was, came from, and all that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And
It
they're also
also
playing around with.
totally changes the whole like decision matrix that you have when buying it if you like don't really know what's going on with the ingredients.
Yeah.
Mm.
They also kind of try doing a couple of kind of savoury cocktails. One has caviar that I think is used in a distillation in some
Wow.
way. We didn't get that one. I really kind of regret not getting it. It just seemed too ridiculous.
Hype factor.
Well, yeah. I don't know. I feel like distilled caviar isn't really a hype.
Mm.
Like,
Oh, but it's like just like shaved truffles over something that
yeah,
doesn't need truffles. It's like, come on.
yeah. And like the garnish in that is a little white chocolate boat that floats in there with more caviar and like fennel and charred
Wow.
things. And but they also do a mushroom and apple one, which is
Yeah.
siphoned at the table, and so it comes out warm, and it's the coffee siphon, so it's siphoned through dried mushrooms at the
Mm.
table, and then you drink it warm. Uh,
Wow.
so I'd love to go back. Topher,
And
maybe when you're in
Birdie's
town.
also a place that
Yeah, let's do it.
Birdie's also a place that's sort of the first of a few I think in Melbourne now that sort of shied away from that classic cocktail bar decor.
Mm.
It's kind of fun and bright and that sort of vibe, isn't it?
Yeah, it's strange because it's in a shopping mall. It's in Melbourne Central. Um, so it's kind of you're looking out at a quite a busy part of Melbourne Central, and then yeah, it doesn't feel like you've stumbled into a hidden alleyway cocktail bar like that kind of old. It's open, it's friendly, it's very pretentious. It's a lot of fun.
It's very precious. But don't you think the fact that it's in like a shopping center and that like it almost like I've met their customers. I'm not going to say anything bad about them because I've never been, and that's not it's not my main thing, and I'm not in the market of generally saying bad things about anyone. But I kind of love that aspect where it is in a shopping center because it almost pays itself out from the second you walk in, and in the same way that you don't know what's in the drinks, you can't walk in with an expectation to that place because you get so jarred like in the physical entrance, as it were. Like I love it.
And
I love the concept.
when they opened, they're not doing it at the moment. I'm assuming the plan is to go back to it though. It was open in the morning using so that you could get porridge there using oats that were used in a fermentation.
Mm,
So a lot of the byproducts of the cocktails were then being used into the daytime menu.
love it.
And they were getting coffee roasted, Australian grown coffee roasted, especially for them. Really, yeah. So you're right in that sense. It is jarring and disjointing because it isn't pretentious in the sense of they just want to make really good stuff, and
Mm.
no matter how they get there, and I guess getting there that it involves small producers and doing it fun and doing it interesting. Yeah, so maybe pretentious is a nah. There's still that element of pretension,
I guess
in
it depends if you
in the best
consider
way.
if you consider a caviar boat garnish pretentious, then
Yeah.
maybe I don't know.
And
But there's a lot of hand sell. Like there's a lot of education that has to happen with that because of the stance they've taken. It's not just going, this is Campari and Prosecco. They've gone, we're not going to tell you what this is. There's bitter, like I'm not going to tell you, but we're not going to let it be that easy for you. So there has to like, I don't know. Luke, firstly, happy birthday. I didn't know
thank
it's
you,
your
thank you.
birthday. Sorry, just
We
I can't continue any longer without saying that.
we didn't even introduce
But
you yet, so we're
well, yeah, I just jumped in there because I really wanted to go to Birdie because I met Luke before the other Luke Weary before they opened, and then they opened and then it was like COVID and I never visited. I haven't been to Melbourne in the longest time. I probably have never been there in my 12 years of living in Australia. But so I've never been, and I've really wanted to go this whole time. So now I'm just like jumping in because I cop a lot of stuff, on social media, and you see, and it looks amazing. I'm just, like I said to you both, Dave and Luke, before jumping in this, just feels like we're chatting with mates about like new places and places for me that are new. So Luke, happy birthday,
Thank you.
firstly, and I'm sorry that I jumped over that, but really, yeah, it's such a fascinating place, and in what we do, you could walk into our brewery, and I'm not trying to shift this isn't, I feel for them, right? Because we're not trying to be pretentious about what we do, but there is a little bit of explanation that's required in order to understand what it is that's in your glass. Like I don't want to labor over that fact and tell you that you have to drink it this way, or you have to know this process in order to like it. In fact, quite the opposite. Just drink it and make your own judgment. Oh, and if you would like to know, then here's the explanation. But you kind of have to be there from an educational aspect for the customer. At both sides, Anyway,
I guess the word pretentious is interesting because sometimes I use it almost like precocious, where if you call a child precocious, it's not always negative, but it does have so many negative connotations. I think I love that pretentiousness because without it, we don't have someone pushing. So maybe it isn't the wrong word. Maybe I'm just using it as an easy way to dismiss thinking about it further. God, I could talk about words like this all night.
But that's the end of the show.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it.
Well, firstly, Dave, how are you going? And then we'll get to Topher.
Mate, no complaints. Living the good life. You know how it is. Yeah, I went to a wedding on the weekend. That took up half of my weekend. So cool.
And you're drinking a beer?
Correct. I'm drinking our dollar bill patron beer that we made with those guys, and it's tasting great.
Yeah,
tasting a little bit more acidic than when I had it. I think I might have had it when we first received them. So when was that, Luke?
End of last year?
December, January, yeah.
End of last year? Okay, yeah. So another few months, and it's sort of developing in a nice little way. Enjoying it.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. Really happy with it. I think I've got a couple of bottles left for my own and a couple of more bottles of people that have inquired about them, the ones we have left over. So, shout out to Dollar Bill. Now's the time to welcome our guest, dear friend, someone who we always, as witness, every time we catch up, we end up just talking for hours about things unrelated to why we're catching up.
Unrelated, yeah.
But it's all related. Topher Baim from Wildflower Brewing and Blending. Is that the right name?
Yeah, that's the right name.
Excellent.
I guess we still don't have a brew house there, so I always do. Between mates, it's always like, well, when we get a brew house, then I think the full name will make sense to people. Or if we, I don't know, who knows. But yeah, we brew offsite, but we certainly blend on site. But we use that is the full name.
Where does brewing start and end?
Should we get into vagueness theory?
Yeah, absolutely.
Luke, when it comes to terms, like how many borderline cases are there of vagueness? I mean, of brewing, as it were. No, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think most people would agree that brewing is the mashing of barley and the boiling of wort. I don't know. I think that's pretty clear. But I don't know. I think when we opened, there's a brewery in the States called Casey Brewing and Blending, and they weren't making their own wort on site, and I kind of just liked that characterization because it would be too weird to say Wildflower Brewery when we weren't making beer there, but just brewing as it, that made a little bit more sense. But yes, that's the name. So thank you so much for having me again. I honestly think that our Carwin episode, however long ago that was, just sitting out on the sidewalk drinking beer was one of my favorite catch-ups, recorded or unrecorded.
That's right.
In a long time. It was a lovely, lovely day.
Because I was going to say the last time we had you on was Sunmoth Canteen, but then we did a show. Dave, I don't think you were at that one.
No, I don't think I was.
I don't think Dave was there.
And the side street at Carwin in the sunshine there is just one of the most pleasant things on a sunny day. So,
Mm.
Yeah, it really is.
Mm.
And what are you drinking, Topher?
I've gone deep. I've gone deep in Emilia Romagna. I love Lambrusca. Like, it is just a revelation to me. I can't drink Australian sparkling Shiraz. It does not get me at all. But traditionally fermented, funky, fizzy Italian red wine, just like not the sweet stuff. I mean, you got to know where you're going. Like, go to Black Hearts and Sparrows and say, I want real Lambrusca. And there's two importers bringing in really good stuff into Australia. Quelvino, who's Melbourne based, so this is one of his producers, and the bottle's downstairs, so I can't go grab it. But it's dry, it's tannic, it's like rich, and fuck. I mean, I'm just a fiend for carbonation, to be honest, but I love it. And I also realized I didn't have any. I have no beer in my house whatsoever. Like, there's literally not one drop of fermented barley
Not even
in
your
my
own
house.
beer?
No, I don't. I don't really bring it home. Not that like I don't drink it. It's just that I leave it it's at work. I've got a cool room at the brewery, and like a section of it is set aside for cellaring. It sounds a little bit ridiculous, but there's like two zones inside the cool room, and one of them is that like wine cellar fermentation space, and that's where the wine and like all the beer that I want to keep as a museum is sitting. And I also find it a bit healthier to leave things there, and that way, if I'm going to bring a bottle home, I need to think about it ahead of time rather than having things on hand. Um, yeah, last year would have seen a lot of people imbibing a bit too much. No, I know, a bit more than they would have normally at home, but that's fine because we were at home, not more. So like, it's relative. But I don't I don't often bring any alcohol home unless unless I thought of it. And a friend was over for dinner before, and we were drinking this wine, so it just carries across. Yeah.
What was for dinner?
Um, well, I roasted a whole pig this weekend for my wife's birthday. So we
Oh,
were out. Just had a lovely weekend. Davey had a wedding. I had a lovely weekend out at a small property, and we did a whole pig over coals, and it was delicious. But there was heaps of leftovers, so I made just a big, big, big salad, and then we had potato buns and pulled essentially pulled pork, but put on this big leftovers, fried up again in its own fat, which is like my favorite thing to do is taking like rendering animal fat and then just throwing that back in the skillet for heating things back up. And oh my god, I mean, it's so bad. I don't know if it is that bad for you, to be honest. I don't know. Anyway, it's probably not the healthiest thing, but it's so good getting that real crispy pulled pork thing, and that, yeah, just different sauces. So pretty simple, just pulled pork, sambos, and salad.
firstly, happy birthday to your wife.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What
thank
a
you.
what a good
Yeah.
thing. I saw on one social media, maybe your Instagram or something, the
Mm.
the pig,
Yeah.
and the big side of crackling had fallen off,
Oh,
and
yeah.
it looked glassy as I've ever seen crackling look.
It was good.
Yeah.
I'd cut it off at that stage because it was just like, it was time to just get into it. And the way it cooks, like, it kind of separates. I mean, if there's any vegans or vegetarians listening, I probably should stop because it's a bit gruesome.
Sorry,
Um,
James from Crafty Pint.
yeah.
To
um,
be fair, a lot of our other friends that listen. But yeah,
yeah. And like, this was a pig from Feather and Bone, who are real leaders in provenance when it comes to animal welfare and husbandry. So like, just to be super woke, like, that's who we only get our animals from. And if it wasn't for that, then I probably wouldn't, like, I couldn't bring myself to eat or purchase supermarket meat. And that's a real price of privilege that allows me to say that. I recognize that. But just to be clear, so if James is listening, like, this was a happy animal that was allowed to live its best life before it was taken for my enjoyment. But anyway, yeah, it split off and it was delicious. It was so good. I really love it. I really love it.
It looked stunning.
Thank you.
Now I am drinking. It's called Brightside Sangiovese.
Yeah.
I'm holding it up to the camera for the people at home watching through YouTube. Uh, what is this? I'm not, I know you sent a press release all about this, Topher. One thing about me, I barely read press releases, and if I
Oh,
do,
come on, not even mine.
I read through it quickly, and then all the information falls out of my head. But I remember thinking that's a really good sentiment about what this beer is. I almost said wine. Um, and I know there's. I mean, I can pick it up in the aroma, but I know there's smoke tainted grapes involved.
Yeah.
So can you sort of give us a rundown of what this is?
Oh, I'm not known for being brief, so I'll just caveat.
We don't have any time limits.
Um,
It's fine.
okay, great. Um, so, I mean, firstly, that's probably the first and only and last press release that I'll ever send you. So I'm a little gutted that you didn't read it.
No,
I think
to be fair, I was probably hamming it up a bit. I definitely, because I think I went back to you with some questions, but yeah.
you did. No, no, and this is probably just one of the first things that I've done as a brewer that I really feel like kind of comfortable spreading the word about. It doesn't feel so. I feel really like taking a step back from the product itself, like what you're drinking, the beer. I don't know. It's a really weird place to be in, I suppose, sometimes to want to share the story about something without the added understanding which the market, like customers take, which is like, oh, you're trying to sell something. And this was one of the first things that I've done in the first projects, and something that I felt like really comfortable about and willing to and keen to share the story. And that's the important part outside of the beer itself, like outside of the product. Like, and so I think that's why I did this, and that's why I suppose we're here, and that's probably one of the why it's probably the first time I've ever really like been direct about, hey, we did this thing, and I'm really proud of it, and I think this story has, like, I don't know, shares. There's things in this that I'd like to share with other people. So thank you for sharing your platform in all the time in order for help me to talk about this. But that's why I did it in the first place. So anyway, the story, I guess, goes that so Brightside is, I suppose, a side label for us. Um, it's a collaborative project with friends of ours and a winery called Ravensworth, and our friends are Brian and Jocelyn Martin of Ravensworth Wines. Ravensworth is a incredibly respected brand in the wine world. Brian earned his stripes as the head winemaker at Clonakilla for many, many, many years. And throughout his time at Clonakilla, started his own brand called Ravensworth. I mean, this is going back more than a decade that he's had Ravensworth as well. But through that time of having his own brand and the as well as working at Clonakilla, they have their own farm, their own estate, which is around the corner from Clonakilla. So Murrumbateman is where we are. We're about 40 minutes north of Canberra, very close to Yass. If anyone's doing the drive from Sydney to Melbourne, you'd know that strip of highway. Very cool climate, and very delicious and beautiful wines made in the area. One of the great, in my opinion, one of the great wine regions of this country that really has yet. I mean, outside of Clonakilla, really has yet to be seen. Anyway, I'm digressing so much. I'll get back to the story, I promise. Brian and Jocelyn are dear friends of ours, and they farm on their property in this sort of super organic way. In that, becoming certified organic for them is very much a tick of the box. It's not an achievement in and of itself. The way that they farm is so much more focused on soil so much more focused on health of the entire ecosystem surrounding their vines. And for someone like me, and I don't make this very quiet, but those are the kinds of things that I think about and push me as a producer outside of trying to make really high quality world class beer, which is what we try to do every day. But really think about like what it is that goes into that. So this is Brian and Jocelyn. Brian's a food writer. He was a food writer. He's a really excellent chef, and he's an excellent fermenter. And in late 2019, Brian and I, actually it was early 2020, Brian was dropping his kids at Laneway Festival. He's also this man that's kind of just that, almost that generational gap between myself and my parents. You know, his kids are 10, 15 years younger than me. And he's one of the, I don't know, lots of people have these people in their lives that are kind of just that in-between generation that you can kind of, I suppose I've thought about him for the 4 years that I've known him as a sort of mentor in the industry, because he's very level and he's very considerate and very thoughtful. But anyway, he's also an excellent fermenter. So if I ever get olives and I'm like, hey, he's the person I text and go, hey, Brian, what do I do with olives? Because he knows what to do with them and how to cure them, and that, or any kind of Japanese food cooking technique he's aware of. Anyway, Brian and I were at dinner together in early 2020, and he shared with me that he had just got his results back that day from the AWRI, so the Australian Wine Research Institute, which is based in South Australia. The AWRI was running at that time for a lot of winemakers these smoke taint analysis. So what those were, or what those are lab results that say to a producer, if you harvest these grapes and make wine from them, these are the potential levels of aromatic compounds that have to do with smoke taint, with smoke in and of itself. So these are the this is the level of, compounds that smell like cigarettes. This is the compound that smells like ash. This is the compound. So they literally give you milligrams per kilogram of those aromatic compounds in the fermentation. And you need to send off for testing, because they send whole fruit. So Brian would have sent whole fruit to the AWRI, so whole grapes, and they crush them and ferment them. And only through the fermentation do these compounds become released. And then through, I don't know, some technical high-end machine that they can measure those results. I don't actually know how that part works, but you get numbers. And Brian's numbers were, not even this figure of speech. They were literally off the charts. The measurement units were so fine tuned to lower grades of smoke taint that the machines weren't able. All they would know was that it's literally off the charts. So the readings show higher than measurable. So it's literally you have so much smoke taint that we can't even measure it for you. And so smoke taint for a winemaker, and the reason that the AWR was doing all of these is smoke taint for a winemaker is harvest ending. If you make a wine using smoke tainted grapes, and grapes that were sometimes as low as 5 times less than the levels that Brian was seeing, you will get severe smoke characters coming through the wine, and those range from that ashtray to just straight up charred, kind of blackened, bitter flavors. And for a wine, that just absolutely rips out the center of the fruit. It doesn't make an enjoyable product as a 100% grape fermented product, right? And so Brian decided, we were at dinner, and he said, look, these are my numbers. And I'd already known this was going to be a thing. We were all in Australia, in late 2019, 2020, we were aware of how you couldn't not be aware of the fires, especially in major, like a lot of people, a lot of us in major cities that are quite separated from it, still had massive amounts of smoke coming into the cities. Um, and Murrumbateman didn't actually have a close fire at all. Like their closest fire was quite a ways away. And the conventional wisdom on smoke taint in wine was that you needed a close fire after veraison. So veraison's when the grapes move from green to red or to clearish yellow if they're going to be a white grape, um, in order for smoke taint to arise. But what was seen through the Australian 2019, 2020 bushfires and subsequent harvest in 2020 is that the knowledge on smoke taint in wine has completely shifted, in there being an understanding now that long exposure of smoke, even from very distant fires, can taint grapes. So Brian and I were having dinner. He told me his results, and right then and there, I like, as a friend for as many years, and as a producer that I respected, and as someone who's sympathetic to I guess the human energy, but even more so the natural energy that is required to make that fruit, like the rainfall, the nutrients from the soil, the sunshine, right? All of these things that were given to those vines in order for them to make grapes, a grape bunch. I just then and there thought, well, we can't throw this out. Like this can't be a null harvest just because of this. Like that's wasteful. And I'm a hater of waste. I'm super thrifty, making things from every. I actually think the brewery is becoming like a bit of a, like Wildflower is becoming like a bit of a like a disposal unit for other producers' byproducts at some stage, because it's getting to that point where I'm just using other people's waste to make things. But that's another story, and I kind of love that. But anyway, so Bryce said to Brian, how many, right? Well, how much beer do you want to make? And he was like, well, he's like, oh, I was going to ask you if you were maybe keen on making some beer. And I was like, nah, we're doing the entire vineyard. Like all of your grapes are going to this project now. And so we pulled off the menu, grabbed a pen from the Somme, and just started writing. I just started writing down, okay, how many tons of this fruit do you expect? How many tons of this grape do you expect? How many tons of this grape do you expect? And so this was sort of probably like mid-Jan 2020. And by the 12th of March, we picked the entire vineyard at Ravensworth for Brightside, this project that we're now releasing. And so the project is something that we've decided to do for a number of reasons. One of them being the conservation of that labor of the land in order to produce that, and not wanting that to be a waste, not wanting the energy inputs into that fruit to be for naught. Secondly, definitely a part of it. This is a 50-50 relationship between myself and Ravensworth, or Wildflower Ravensworth. There isn't a huge amount of beer. It's more than a normal release for us, but this is a way for me as a mate of Brian's to try to help him recover a portion of the cost of the harvest. He still had to pick all the grapes, because you can't just leave the grapes on the vineyard or on the vines, or the disease will come into the vineyard, and the birds will come in more and more each year. So you had to pick them anyway. And this is like any like profits from this, which will I mean, not trying to be humble here, but just trying to be realistic, there won't be many. But what we can give back to Brian should cover the cost of the farming of the fruit at least. It won't get close to the cost, the potential value of that fruit had it been made into wine. But that's another aspect in terms of helping him. And thirdly, there's lots of reasons, but another reason we wanted to do it, if we're doing this and why we're releasing them, is to kind of challenge this aspect of what is valuable and what is waste. Why is it that one industry looks at something like this, the wine industry, and says it no longer is a product that can be value added? And I know because of my time in regional areas and because of my time, which isn't super long, but because of my small understanding of farming, I mean, that's a real question that a lot of agricultural, like primary industry people think about themselves as like, how is my product being translated downstream and becoming more profitable? And are those things that I could do in house in order to either make a better price for the customer, or get that extra profit and grow their business in some way? For example, why would a wheat farmer just sell all of their wheat to a miller, and the miller do all the milling? Potentially, is there an option for a wheat farmer to value add and mill their own flour, like the family at Woodstock, who sells a lot of flour into Melbourne, and are good friends of ours. So that this idea of value adding in terms of wine farming or grape farming, the value adding is making wine, and selling the wine for more than the grapes cost, right? And so this idea of into the industry, like, is there a potential for value adding to this fruit that is seen as complete waste? Because this isn't going to stop. Like, as much as I'd love for the entire world to be carbon neutral by 2022, it's not going to happen. I should hope that we can get to more I don't know, aggressive climate goals than some of the things that we're talking about at the moment. But the extreme weather events that we're seeing are probably not going to go away in the short term. So we probably need to be a little bit more clever about how we think about the products of these weather events, and make something of them. And lastly, I mean, there's completely so many more reasons as to why we're doing this and what it is that you're drinking in your glass. Um, but I really also, from a brewing perspective, I realized this was probably the first and only time that me as a brewer could walk into a vineyard and make every shot in terms of picking dates, how I want things to be made, the varietals that I want to use. Brian has on his property a vast number of varietals that I'm really interested in. And I really saw it as an opportunity to expand my knowledge as a producer in terms of knowing like what's best, what really works well, like which grapes do we like and what handling of them do we prefer. I mean, it was this like huge acceleration, like for me, of what I was able to play around with. I mean, I will never get the chance, unless all of the fruit is smoke tainted, to walk onto a vineyard, a property that I don't own, grapes that I never farmed, and say this is how I want it to be done, for my own purposes and for my purposes. So I saw that as an exciting aspect as a producer, but also potentially as a bit of a burden is the wrong word, but as a bit of a duty to do it. And even if the beer turned out shite, I was just going to dump it and just go, well, at least I know that's the upper limit, right? And at least I can say that to someone else in the future, is say, look, here were my numbers before going into this. This is how I treated the ferment. And this was the result, from my olfactory, from the way that I tasted. If it wasn't good, I could at least say it wasn't good and it's not worth your time to go down that road anymore. No one had that data point for me. And so I was able to take, at least for the bright side, 5 varietals at different levels of smoke taint, because every varietal maintains the smoke and kind of takes it in different ways, and make these beers and get them tested as once they're fermented, and look at, like, as beers, look at the testing on that, like post production, but more importantly, look at the flavors in them. And, not funny, but oddly enough, and I guess sort of verifying, like, I don't know, my idea of doing that was somewhat validated very quickly, unfortunately, in the US, when 6 months later, California, Oregon, was also on fire with wildfires, and even Napa Valley burnt. Like, that was never burnt. These vineyards that were fruit is going for like 20,000 US dollars per ton, no joke. These vineyards were entirely smoke tainted. And I had friends messaging and calling me from the US saying, Topher, like, what should we do with this stuff? You know, can we, our friends are looking at a null harvest. Can we use their grapes in order to make something? And yeah, I just felt like, okay, well, shit, I'm glad I did this. Even if the result is crap, I don't think the result's crap. That's not me trying to sell it. I actually think there's value in what's in your glass, Luke. But that was, I mean, another part. So I don't know, how long has that been? When did you ask me that question? Sorry.
We're not
That's what's
keeping
in
a
your
timer.
glass. Yeah. So,
I guess to that, there was a question from the chat from our good friend Judd before we go too far. But
yeah.
the smoke's an interesting aspect because it's certainly underlying, and my initial thought, kind of almost subconscious, is, oh, there's a fault in there, because smoky or band-aidy can be a fault in these kinds of beers. And once it kind of opened up in the glass and I kind of got familiar with it, it becomes more of a sort of a top note of almost tobacco or leathery kind of a smoke, I think I get, which I think is really integrated. And now I'm kind of almost through the bottle. I mean, I've still got a big chunk of my glass, but the acidity of the beer is actually coming through a lot more. Looks gorgeous. Is a beautiful head retention in there as well. This isn't the cleanest glass, and it's still, sticking around. It's, in terms of a product that's well made and enjoyable to drink, the fact that I'm probably halfway through and still picking up new things is, that's kind of what we love about beer, or these kinds of beers at least, anyway.
Oh, thank you. And I mean, that was a real, like, I skipped the whole making part, and we can talk about that in terms of, what happened from March 12th, from picking the grapes until what's in your glass. But it's almost beside the point in some aspect, and in others it's not. But I'm really smoke isn't. I mean, one of the other backgrounds as to why I was like, well, let's do this, is because we make Foggy Morning, and that's 100% smoked malt beer, and people love that. So why am I worried about smoke in beer? I mean, I love rock beer. Like why smoke is at home in this beverage in a similar way that Brettanomyces is.
It's a jarring thing with fruit, I think, at times. Thinking about, speaking of Judd in the comments,
we should actually ask the question, hey?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I actually, before we go, I'm actually making a hot sauce for Judd when he comes down,
Nice.
with some Carolina Reapers that someone's giving me, and I'm going to smoke some of them before I make the hot sauce. And it's one of the few recipes that I don't actually add fruit in. But now, after drinking this, I'm like, well, maybe there is some sort of fruit in there I can add into the ferment along with the smoke, just to make it even weirder. A smoked Carolina Reaper hot sauce for Judd.
Well, it's interesting, because the Riesling doesn't show it at all. Like you wouldn't, if the power of suggestion puts it into your mind, then you'll find it. But you can do that with anything. It's actually not present in the Riesling beer, the smoke at all, for all of our palates. I mean, most people have tasted it and said that. But in the Gamay it is, and yet that's been the preferred beer for a number of people that I've showed the whole flight to, but the main part for me is that it's not, because of the way that it's fermented in the beer, and because of the dilution rate, and because of the fruit and other aspects of the beer, it's not the whole story. It's like if you're going into these beers looking for Foggy Morning, you'll be disappointed. If you're looking for Action Keller, you'll be disappointed. Like it's not in that level. It's actually, I would hope, I guess, and everyone's palate's gonna perceive this differently, but just like all of our beers, like, we want these to be nuanced like kind of things, and then you kind of keep going back. And I'm not surprised you haven't finished a bottle or you've almost finished a bottle, because that's the way that we've drank these beers at a brewery as well. So I'm like, oh shit, that's really interesting. Another glass. Oh, we finished the bottle. Like you can keep searching for things, and they keep popping up, and then it's like, whoa, here we go. Anyway,
it's the kind of beer you could see out an entire menu of a dinner very easily, from main to dessert, and find just pairings and interesting things the whole time. Dave,
I've got a
question from
couple
Chad.
of sorry. Well, Judd's question was did you lean into the smoke characteristic with the smoked malt, or did you try and play off the flavor?
We didn't use smoked malts in the grist. So we did a bit of both. So if we were trying to devoid the drink of any smoke impact, we would have handled the fruit differently. And by that I mean we probably would have allowed it to spend less time on skins. But because of how we make beer, and because of how 2020 was 2021 was my fifth. So this year is my fifth harvest using wine grapes in beer, and because of, well, I guess 2020 would have been my fourth. And because of our experience using wine grapes in beer, the brief as it was and as it still is now, I prefer time on skins as a way to bring out varietal character in the beer from the fruit. So varietal being Gamay, Shiraz, Riesling, whatever it is. And so I had a discussion with Brian, the winemaker in Vigneron, that look, I wanna carbonically macerate this fruit. So I want the fruit to start its own fermentation on its skins before we add beer, because I wanted that microbiology from the vineyard to be present in the beers. And that's how we treat all of our wine grape beers. And in fact, that's how we treat pretty much every fruit ferment now, is allowing the fruit to start its own fermentation before we blend in beer. But that making that decision from the quality of a beer, that was made from the quality of the beer perspective rather than the mitigate smoke perspective. If we wanted to eliminate smoke, we wouldn't have done that. We would have put beer onto whole fruit straight out of the vineyard, without allowing it to start its fermentation. And we probably wouldn't have left the beer on skins for 7+ months as we did for these.
Now, I've got a couple of Smoke Taint 101 questions that I wonder if you could answer for me.
Cool.
What's the responsibility of the growers when there's a chance that there's going to be smoke taint present? Is that something that they lead the conversation on, or is it like a requirement once a certain condition's met?
What do you mean by grower? Do you mean like if you were a winemaker but didn't grow your own grapes?
Or no, well, whoever's producing the grapes, I'm assuming they're responsible for doing the homework to see if there's going to be smoke taint.
Yeah, but, I mean, because it hits whole. It's an interesting question, because it almost kind of fascinating.
Because is there any indicator before it gets tested?
I mean, not just the knowing that there's been bushfires around, or that your neighbors got theirs tested and it was pretty bad, or whatever it was. It wouldn't have been that bad or whatever. To make a wine with smoke taint is a huge risk.
Yeah,
huge, because it not only is it present in that wine that you make, it leaches into the barrels if you put it to oak, and it can have other detrimental effects in your cellar carried on. So producers wouldn't make one if they didn't have to.
yeah.
And like, I only know of one. I know there were a couple more, but I know like, Meg and James Becker in the Hunter Valley made a wine called Burnt, that they used smoke tainted Shiraz to make a wine, and just said to the grower, and I guess this is what maybe you're getting to. The grower was coming to them saying like, I can't not have the funds from this fruit. I know it's smoke tainted because everyone in the region was smoke tainted. But can you try to make something from it? And Megan James just said, well, sure, but like I can't pay you until we sell it, if that's okay. And they're like, yep, that's fine. And much to their surprise, they sold all of it quite quickly, actually, at their cellar door in the Hunter Valley. It's interesting because that question kind of comes as a product of like this understanding that a grower and a winemaker are kind of separate entities, but then also that there's not, and this isn't from a, don't take this, like in the brewing industry, we have barley growers, maltsters, brewers, hop growers. These are all independent people. And I suppose, I'm not trying to say the wine industry is much more connected, but if grape growers aren't generally growing grapes for heaps of different people, it's not nearly as broad as, the customer list of a Barrett Burston, going into heaps of different breweries. It's much tighter. And then because of the sheer locality and regionality of the product itself, there's no getting away from it. So once you know that there's smoke taint in the region, and that's evident just because there's fires in the area, then the grower wouldn't be able to hide from it. And then certainly the fermented product, you can't mistake it once it's in there. It's an interesting question because it'd be interesting to know if like there was like a proviso that someone sold fruit to someone else, and under that contract they said, if the fermented drink has under XYZ levels of smoke taint, then we will pay you this rate, or if it's over, it's a different rate. That's really interesting. I'm not sure, because I mean there is a lower limit for sure, and some of these compounds exist in fruit that hasn't been near a bushfire at all. So there is a lower limit on what smoke taint is. Does that get to the answer? So I'm not sure is probably the most honest answer, but at the same time, I don't think that would be there's no dancing around the issue from a grower's perspective. Like it's not as vague. We're getting back to there's not a huge amount of vagueness. Like it's tainted or it's not.
Is it kind of part of it where if a region is smoke tainted, everyone in the industry knows if they're getting their grapes from that area that it is. Whereas, somewhat of an unscrupulous seller or winemaker might kind of know, or might just put it out into the market. Much, I guess, like beer can happen with, faulty beer ends up on shelves all the time. And I guess what's the responsibility of the brewer to kind of not put that into market? Is that part of it, Dave?
Yeah, I just wondered like if there's obviously there's a massive financial impact, and if there is the spectrum of impact on the fruit, and a producer is willing to take a punt on what the product might be transparently, then like is there like a protocol that they need to have with whatever the body is? The other question I had is
That's a good question.
do you know if the smoke taint has any future impacts, barring any future bushfires, on the vines in future harvests?
They actually bounce back from fire pretty well, like a lot of plants. There was a grower in Tumbarumba who like literally their vineyard burned, and the same thing happened in Adelaide Hills. So fire was coming underneath the vines, and canopy was lost, and some of the rootstock was lost as well. And so some of that will burn down and completely die. But rootstock, if it's just been like devoid of foliage and all the buds and the fruit, so it went through a fire, but maybe it wasn't a super hot fire, or it was just kind of a quickly passing one, they'll reshoot. So you chainsaw them at the top of where every pruning system would have their own way of dealing with it after that. But you certainly, I guess the answer is that depends on the intensity of the fire. But like just smoke taint from distant vines, nothing.
No, not
nothing.
At all.
No, it's soaked into the fruit, and that's the frustrating thing, is that you can't see it. The fruit, when we picked it, at Ravensworth for this beer was perfect. I mean, it was a dry year, so it was quite small. The yield was quite low, in relative terms to other years. But you can't, like, it's not like the fruit looked burnt. It hadn't been like charred. I mean, there was no fire near that, and it's hops don't get smoke tainted. They don't. That agricultural product, hop, doesn't pull in smoke taint like grapes do. And I mean, it's a real blessing, I suppose, for the hop industry. Like, it's quite lucky for them. But if it had, we would be hearing about it if they did. I mean, think about Northern Victoria and the proximity it had to some fires. So yeah, the HPA farm up there, like, it would have been massive for the industry. Like, imagine that. I mean, that's what it was for the wine industry, I guess, but huge impacts. But no, Brian's grapes this year, Brian's vines rather, didn't have. There's no residual impact in the next harvest.
How good.
Yeah, it's quite cool.
One more question from Judd. Do you think, Topher, there's a greater market for smoke-tainted wines than the producers seem to believe?
That's again, we're operating in speculation, which is never healthy. I would say both yes and no. Yes, in the sense that we, as beer drinkers and beer enthusiasts, not only ourselves have quite, I like to say, promiscuous palates, but we know that many of our friends in the industry do, and there are dozens of beers made in the Australian and wider world that I would never touch with a 10-foot pole as a drinker. But they find there are markets, and who am I to say that that's wrong? And I do think that I'm speaking personally, this has nothing to do with Brian. So if anyone from the wine world is going to listen to this is purely my personal view. I think that there's a lot of restrictions in the wine world, and there is a certain pandering to the way things have been done, and then the way that they should be done, whatever should means. And knowingly releasing a smoke-tainted wine would be heavily frowned upon in the industry. It has been done, and James and Meg Becker and the Hunter, as I was saying, did it recently. They very much controlled the flow of that, where it went, made sure people weren't cellaring it, all that kind of stuff. I agree with Judd in the sense that, yeah, I mean, there probably is. There really probably is. And it just requires a bit of lateral thinking from the industry to accept that might be a reality in the future. At the same time, I've drank smoke-tainted wine, and I myself would not be a part of the populace that's purchasing those wines. It's not a flavor that, in wine, it's not a flavor that I enjoy.
I'd also imagine that, like, there'd be, for the people that think that they'd be adventurous enough to check it out, it might not go beyond checking it out.
True. Yeah, but then I mean, whiskey, charcuterie, like cheeses, like, why in so many other fermented drinks? Like, I mean, there is really an argument to be made for it. Like, that why can't? I mean, some people did, like, and that's what James was saying. From the Hunter, he was like, people kept. He's like, I should have made more. This is the winemaker in the Hunter Valley. He's like, people really enjoyed it, and why am I the arbiter of what they enjoy or not? Because I don't enjoy it. He's a producer. He's like, this isn't what I would choose. But is it my job to only to tell people what they should drink and what they should enjoy? Like, don't know.
I've had smoke tainted wine at very low levels, but I enjoyed it. This was years ago. I don't know if my palate would still enjoy it, but maybe I enjoyed it for the difference. And thinking of that story of the burnt wine, that release has a story attached to it, it has a control to it. If it's every product is that, then suddenly that becomes a problem. Whereas, and I guess thinking about, cheese or whiskey, the control of the smoke or the flavors developed in the smoke have been developed for years or centuries, whereas in wine, the develop or control of those flavors probably isn't ever thought of.
Mm.
So you're not making wine with that in mind, and then when it comes out, it tastes terrible.
You're not
Um,
knowingly lighting fires,
Yeah, it's
during
certainly
yeah,
harvest,
is beyond
and
control.
controlling the level and finding the nuanced axis of, yeah, yeah,
yeah, and there's so many unknowns in that
yeah.
if you're starting if you think of it, if someone's starting a new fermented beverage category,
Mm.
20 years ago, people starting to do, or even 5 years ago, people started to do like kettle sours in sort of modern methods, or 10 years ago were all sorts of off flavors. Now we're
Mm.
kind of getting a handle on what modern kettle souring is and how it can, improve and make better results. So yeah, I think maybe, yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting because all of us would be interested to try any wine that a winemaker says has got smoke taint, but I'm really happy with it
Mm.
any day of the week.
Mm.
And I think that's probably true of a lot of the market, but the story might need to always be part of it,
Mm.
or we work out how to manage it.
Yeah.
I say we, like I know I'm part of the wine industry all of a sudden. How the wine industry.
Well, I mean, I know, but I don't feel like I'm a part of the. I mean, none of us are part of the wine industry, but I think it's like it's something that they're going to have to deal with, and I think it's something that's like much like climate change. It's gonna take a lot of different opinions and results and sorry, solutions. So, like, will there be winemakers knowingly making smoke tainted wine in the future when their grapes are tainted? I would say affirmatively, yes, that's going to be a thing. And that's not because like I'm just playing the law of averages here. Like that's not me like having some insight. It's just it's going to happen
Hmm.
because they're not going to be able to not make wine and not do it. But do I also think that there's a broader range of things to be done with this fruit that might be undesirable to have in the cellar for years to come? Yeah, I do. I do. And I mean, and that's part of just the teasing this out is like, I mean, the whole project is not meant to be, just throwing things at the wind and going, well, let's see what the fuck happens. Um, it really is just like this kind of, I needed to go through that myself to go like, is this something that's viable? Like, can we do this? Can we make this? And okay. And now, I mean, uh, I guess from a sales perspective, I shouldn't say that the release of this beer and then the I shouldn't say that the acceptance of it or non-acceptance of it is in and itself a test. It's its own kind of level. But like I probably shouldn't. I'm also not going to lie about that. Like I'm fascinated to know how people find these beers. And I think there's the conversation that I had. There's a lot of people that are really interested to know, and it's not because they're like horrendously smoky. It has nothing to do with that. It's actually more the can you knowingly sip something with the story that they have. Mermaid was the hardest hit region in all of the 2019, sorry, in the 2020 harvest, the level with the highest smoke taint levels in wine in Australia. So can you take the worst of the worst and turn it into a black swan? Like, let's have a look. So, I mean, it's knowingly giving you something that from one side of our brains we should say this isn't worthwhile, but then you kind of have to sit with yourself and say, okay, can I put my perceptions aside and view this product as it is and as it presents in the glass rather than what I bring to it. I mean, that's why we call it the bright side, right? And it says on the label, like, share our optimism. Like, this isn't, we didn't want, it says at the start, it says, I can't remember what it says, Luke. Yeah, I've lost your video this whole time, Luke. I've just
Oh
been
no,
chatting to Dave this whole time.
I've been nodding
Um,
along. Don't worry.
oh, great. Okay. But it says, I think it says like, well, we didn't expect to be here, but here we are. Like, this isn't something that I hope to look forward to do with Brian next year. Like I hope we don't have to do this again. But if we did, and there's a roadmap, and then it kind of goes through the project a little bit, and then it's just share optimism. Like, can you? I think it's more of a question. I'm intrigued not because of the how people will receive the product, like in terms of the product itself. It's actually more how people will receive the product. How do you swallow the story and then receive what comes in it. Because I mean, I as a producer and as a beer drinker, I stand by it. I love them. I really do. I really do. And that's not me trying to say, please, but go out and buy the beer. Like I wouldn't have released it if I didn't think they were valid and valuable in and of itself. The question
Um,
is, can you swallow it? Yeah.
so give us some. We've done the story. Can we get some raw numbers? What beers are available? How
Yep.
widely?
Yep.
How do people get these?
Yep. So 5 beers. So I'll go in volume that we have them. Right side. So all of the beers have the same label, and the only differentiating factor is, well, obviously the ABV on the side, but on the front it'll tell you the grape that it's made with. So bright side, Gamay, Shiraz, whatever. So Gamay and Shiraz are about similar volumes, and they're sitting about 270 cases each. So that's a lot. It's big. It's big for us. It's a lot of beer,
Hmm.
especially for mixed culture, wild mixed culture, barrel aged beers made with smoked tainted fruit. It's a lot. I mean, it was like when Brian said, I said, how much beer do you want to make? And he said, let's do it all. And I was like, oh shit, all right. And then even in that single aspect, I was like, well, I owe it to my mate to do this. But also I was like, fuck, really, this better work out. Um, but so those are the biggest, Shiraz and Gamay, and then Riesling is sitting just over half that, about 170 cases, and then the Sengio one that you're drinking and the Viognier are the smallest, and they're like about 60, 65 cases, really small. Um, so the Sengio and the Viognier will be available through. So all five will be available through the brewery, like our website. Um, in Melbourne, and I think quite nationally, the most prominent retailer will surely be Black Arts and Sparrows. They have all of them as well, the whole range, because they're huge supporters of Brian's. And this has been another interesting process from a producer aspect is figuring out where these beers should go, and who, like which accounts and kind of customers are really passionate about the story and the value of the fruit and the agricultural process behind that. So anyway, Black Arts will definitely have a lot. P&V in Sydney will have the whole range. Any of the places that we're going to on our national road show, which WA should not, please don't F this up for us. But I'll talk about the road show in a minute if we want. But the whole range will be available from a select number of retailers, a small amount. But we've just received, like, we just sent out our pre-release emails today, and I've been looking at the emails coming through, and the top three, I mean, the Shiraz, Shiraz, Gamay, and the Riesling will be available at most of our normal wholesale customers, as well as some of the wholesale stockists that Brian sells to. And I've set up a separate page on the website um, that's pretty prominent when you land on the wildflowerbeer.com website about where that about Brightside, and then that page has a list of stockists. So as we get orders, we'll update that, and then by May 7th, which is a release, so we're still just over a week and a bit away from the release. Those accounts those stockists will have that stock, so it'll be a national release, which I've only done once before, but I really wanted this one to be kind of because we're talking about the beer and I'm sharing the story. Like, I want people to know where they can get it instead of just being like, oh yeah, it's all vanished. It's you can't buy it. That's not the point at all. But those are the rough volumes, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
And we have tasting notes on all of them on our website. Mike Benny was really, really kind. He's a prominent wine writer, really kind, and wrote tasting notes for them as well on his wine rub website, the Wine Front, which was fascinating in and of itself. And that he's obviously a very good friend, and we do have a beer together that shouldn't be left unsaid. And this fact that he doesn't profit from this the Brightside stuff at all, but we do have a project together, Mike and I, that he is a part in. But he posted those tasting notes on his very much wine dominant and wine centric website, which was really really cool for me as a beer producer. But also, I think when you zoom out on the project and kind of, I guess, consider, I guess, the not the impact, but the statement, I guess, that I wasn't trying to make, but I think that will kind of be unintentionally made by making something from these smoked tinted grapes. So Mike's taking that very seriously, and he has really amazing tasting notes on all of them on his website as well, the Wine Front. So those were all there. Yeah, so a long-winded answer again.
That's all right. I want to move on to a couple more things before we wrap up.
Sure.
Dave, any other questions from the chat about the smoke taint beers?
One from Lonnie. Topher, do you think that tasting products made with smoke tainted fruit might be a call to action for wine or beer drinkers?
Tasting products from, I mean, well, it's a call to action now. I mean, you can go out and go buy the Blood Brightside beers. I mean, I mean, I can't lie that it's. I said, knowing Brian's prominence in the wine industry, so Brian is hugely respected. Brian's one of these people that pours his wine at Rootstock, RIP, the Natural Wine Festival, as well as having his wines, get very high marks on Halliday. And not many producers can span that arc in terms of being regarded and well respected in both fronts. And one of the reasons that I guess gave me an assurance, I mean, Brian's a very close friend, as I've already mentioned, and I wanted to help him out. But there was a small kind of, had I done this with a producer that is a bit more on the edge or a bit more, there are dozens of friends that I would have liked to, and I probably should have done this with. But had I done it with someone that was more funky or whatever, however the market views them, there's a potential that consumer wouldn't take it with the gravity that we've undertaken the product with. I mean, while it was a bit of a toss in the dark, we went about it in a way to make high quality product at the end of the day. The fruit was beyond organically farmed. It was picked when it was timed for it to be picked, like in terms of ripeness levels. We brewed our beer, fermented it with, we brewed our beer with organic grains, and it wasn't organic hops at that stage. Fermented, we did all the right things in order to make this still a valid, high quality product. And I think undertaking this project with Brian, part of that is to be able to maybe in some way get people over the hump of the perception and go ahead and jump in and taste it. Because if you know Brian's wine, or if you can not like either of them, or you can like them both, then hopefully that repertoire of what we've released in the past, and more importantly, Brian, what he's released in the past, will help someone just get over the perception in their mind that might make them not do it. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's an importance to do it, because it's devastating, man. I mean, it's more and more our beer is becoming more agricultural, and I'm not gonna go too long down this road, because I could go down it for a very long time. But I can't stand by, as well as being a city dweller. I felt so shit and empty watching the impacts of those bushfires for all of our friends that own breweries in regional areas, Sellers Grove, and many others, and Bright, and everyone whose tap rooms were completely closed. I mean, Mountain Culture had just opened, and they were really good friends of mine. And I was there for the opening in November, and I was back there a month later with TJ and Harriet, and the place was empty. I mean, this is December, empty. I mean, the smoke was so heavy coming through the mountains. I was just sitting in the city going, I just couldn't sit on my hands anymore, right? Like I just needed to do something. Like what can I do? Like I'm that kind of person. And so from a customer perspective, yeah, like please, because maybe it's a part of, I mean, buying our beer, harvesting these grapes for this small project and making these beers, we're not making a shift in the global impact of smoke taint, great, or conservation. I mean, this isn't a huge thing. This is pretty small at the end of it, but maybe just shifting that perspective a little bit will help people get down the line a little bit more in terms of what is valuable, what's not, what's waste, and what's not. So, yeah, I think there is a need for people to do it in time to come and make your own judgment on it, regardless of what a critic says or not. So yeah.
That's a really good answer. Thank you, Topher. Uh, before we wrap up, I want to find out what is happening with Wildflower outside of this.
Yeah.
Being isolated for so long, I don't even know what's going on in Sydney. I don't really know what's going on outside of my 5Ks. What's exciting you at the moment in the world of Wildflower, and where, what do the next 12 months look like for you?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, since we've spoken, there's a lot has happened, but we hired and have kind of built a really nice little team. So notably, like we hired someone who came out just to work with us for a couple of months, Chase, who was the head brewer at Arizona Wilderness, and he came out in late February 2020 just to do 2 months kind of stage, and then COVID happened, so now he's stayed. He's become our head brewer, and so he's really, over the past year, it's helped me a lot in order to kind of focus on more creative projects and things that I'm more interested in, rather than the ordering raw materials and the actual making sure bottles and labels. And I don't want to like minimize his role in saying that's all he's doing, but there's a administrative burden that's been taken off my plate. That's been really, really nice. And I really think like the past year, it's really just allowed me to have a bit more perspective around what we do and how I am as a dad and as a business owner. So it's really less things so business focused and more kind of like life goals that we've been able to kind of achieve, I suppose. Now going forward, I mean, there's heaps of things I'm always excited. Like you can the wind changes and I get excited about something, so it's not too surprising. But the spontaneous beer that we brewed up in Mountain Culture last year using our new cool ship is tasting really good in barrel. Like really, really buoyed by that. Like really excited about blending a couple of those this year and probably putting them in bottle and hopefully releasing them, I don't know, end of this year, early next year. So that's really exciting to see that. Ryefield had a pretty good harvest this year. Obviously better than last year's. It's not hard, but still probably not quite enough for us to. It definitely wasn't enough for us to be able to switch wholly to their hops, unfortunately. So, and it's not from our production levels being crazy. It's just that the vines weren't at the maturity levels that they thought they would be at. So while the harvesting equipment and everything like that worked really well for their New South Wales regeneratively grown organic hops, it's not something we'll be able to switch to entirely over this year. But it's really, we'll be able to use them more in our recipes, and that'll be exciting. And that is exciting for me. We've done a lot of great beers this year, like a lot using skins and second use fruit. Second use has been like after their main use, and those are looking really good. We are streamlining our lives and getting rid of 375 ml bottles, which is like not a big thing from like a lot of perspectives, but I'm really excited about bottling, St. Thomas in a few months, our cherry beer, because we won't have to deal with 375s, and they're just a pain in the ass to deal with. and we're just going all 750s, and some people will be upset about that. I know a lot of retailers will be, because the price point drops up. But I'm just making a me decision and going. I want one box in my life. I want one bottle in my life. I don't need all of this variety. And in speaking to a couple people about it, I think that's been well received. Just in terms of a 375 ml bottle, just seems to empty itself a lot sooner than we. Oh yeah, then we good. I should probably go to bed soon. And I don't know. I mean, that's a pretty lame thing to be excited about, but I am excited about it. What else? I mean, I don't know. I'm excited for this roadshow. I'm excited about lots of things. I really, at the end of the day, the things that we're probably focusing on the most, and I'm spending a lot of time and effort considering, is the origin of our materials still, and the way that they're farmed, and how that impacts what we do in the brewery. So I hope to just continue on that path. So if more of the same is the answer to that question.
That's pretty exciting. Well, as interesting and complex and delicate as all your wild beers are, I still love picking up a can of table beer whenever I go to Carmen
I'm so glad I got over my mental block to putting that beer in a can, because if there's a beer that's coming home with me, it's that one for sure. And it's been awesome to see. I was so anxious about it, like letting your little kid out into the world. I thought people would just balk at a 2 point something percent. Like when you're in the brewery, you can explain it to them and where it comes from and all this kind of stuff. So people enjoyed it, but I really thought that when it got out into the world, people would just be like, "This is garbage. Like, I want more bang for my buck." And the complete opposites happened. Like, what a surprise! Like, genuine surprise. Like, and I'm so excited by it, because if there's one beer that I'd love for our brewery to be known by, it's that one. Like, genuinely, like, I love it.
Like, I mean, I'm sure I don't have a very typical purchasing patterns, but I'm sure it's not unique. But like, if I'm buying a mixed six or something like that, then I'm looking for something like that as a staple part of it every time. So it's good to have those kind of beers available by your favorite producers.
Oh, thanks, Dave. I'm glad we could fill that gap. And I mean, the side benefit that it's our first certified organic beer. We became certified as a producer. We only use that certification on that beer because that's the only one that uses the organic hops. But we would hope that, I hope that in 3 or 4 years, I'll be able to apply that certification across all of our beers. And not because it's some sales technique, but just in order to put our money where our mouth is and say, look, we're open to be audited. We're open to that. And whether or not a consumer wants that is yet to be seen. I'm not actually sure. We did separate thing. I would hope that more and more brewers will see the value in nourishing ingredients and well farmed ones. But that has yet to be seen. But that was a really, both of those things. I mean, releasing the beer in cans was one part, but also being able to carry the the certification and say, this is, I don't know, I suppose, like, yeah, just put my money where my mouth is and go, I really value this. And I value it on our cheapest beer.
Yeah, it's a marketable expression of your values.
Yeah.
We probably need to wrap up. I actually have an early start in the morning, so no, don't apologize at all. It's the one time I've actually got an early flight in the morning.
Are you coming to Sydney?
No, heading up to Early Beach. Early Beach, is that how you say it?
Lovely.
To visit an agave farm.
Oh, cool. Is it the one that James Becker got the agave for?
Possibly. I know nothing about it. I think there's only one in Australia, so
that must be the one. So this guy that made the burnt thing, he made tequila from it last year. It won. It won in the top 10 on Drink Easy. Anyway.
Okay. Well, I'll find out. Do you have anything? So you're doing the road show. Where do people find out information about that?
Information's on the website. Wildflower beer, something or other, Brightside. Just go to the website and hits it. Roadshow. Yeah, we're going to Sydney, Canberra, Griffith, Adelaide, Melbourne, Perth, Launceston. This is Brian and I traveling together, talking about sharing the beers, getting that story out there, I suppose. I mean, really, it kind of came about from the two of us just wanting to get on the bloody flight and see mates, which we'll do across all of things. So mates, come along, please. But you know, there's this. I also love at Mona. They have a kind of eat the problem, kind of this idea of like, oh, eat the pest. You know, these things are. And I don't like the characterization that smoked immigrants are a problem. You know, like that they're a fault, as it were, in the first place. But why don't we make, like, there's the idea from the two of us was like, well, let's just have a bit of a party, I suppose, around us. And all the events are pretty relaxed. No sit down dinners in that, you know, just to come along and have a taste and have a yarn.
Awesome. I'm hoping we get to catch up while you're in Melbourne.
Yes, please. Did you get tickets for a minute to go?
No, I'm in Good Beer Week planning. I haven't thought outside of anything.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know. We'll hopefully cross
paths. It might
paths.
be sold out. Anyway, we'll see. Anyway, no, we will cross paths. We'll cross paths. I'm never. So yeah.
The couple of things next week. Dave, I haven't actually told you this. We'll be doing a show with Bent Spoke, Richard and Tracy from Bent Spoke. Tracy, one of the unsung heroes of Bent Spoke. We're going to be talking about the Patricia Piccinini collab. One of their beers has been relabeled with some Patricia Piccinini artwork. For people that follow the Australian artwork, that's art world. Sorry, that's super exciting. It's the only podcast I've done where Emma has just been more excited than the guest than I have been. So I'm really excited. I've seen a lot of her work in art galleries, and hopefully she'll be joining us on the podcast. But if not, Richard and Tracy is just as exciting. We'll put out details about when we're going to do a live stream of that and put up on the podcast. So that's really cool.
That's awesome.
Dave, where do people get you?
Send me an email, david@alavatime.com. How about you, Luke?
Luke@alavatime.com. If you see any Good Beer Week ads in your Facebook feed, please give them a like and a comment. It will help my algorithms immensely. I don't know what I'm doing.
Will do.
Thanks to everyone that joined us in the feed, and to patrons. We're just waiting on the links to arrive for everyone to order their beer. But if you're really keen to get it and you can't order from the shop, just send me an email and start the conversation.
I recommend doing that because it's really, really good.
The beer is stunning, and
very good,
Topher, when you're in town,
I can't wait. Yeah,
you'll be getting a bottle as a patron as well. Thank you so much for doing that.
Of course. Yeah.
Thanks so much to everyone that joined us, and we'll see you all next week.
Ciao.